Well, I hope you are off to a good start in setting your students up for success. Before we jump into and look ahead, let's talk a little bit about last week and some reflection. You had really robust discussions and formative feedback in sharing your assessments. Thank you for that. I have posted replies in everyone who has submitted, and I'll assign a grade today and get that in there as well. Let me offer some reflections on the overall thrust of the discussion. First, a couple questions and things to consider. When we set up our assessments, are we setting it up for a student to succeed in the way a problem or an artifact is constructed or solved in a global or a North American context? Both may be appropriate, but that's just something to consider. Is it a monocultural or multicultural solution and collaborative approach to the assignment? Think about PowerPoint. We all know PowerPoint gets its share of negative press, but something to consider about PowerPoint, it was created in the Silicon Valley, and it is very linear in its approach, and it's didactic. It can be word-based, and a lot of the negative press of PowerPoint is probably for good reason. But something to consider is the cultural context within which PowerPoint itself was created and the cultural context behind the learning it tends to promote. So opening your assignments up to various ways for people to be able to present or convey information may also move your course more towards equity and inclusion. Collaboration, just some thoughts in our overall discussion forum. There are some tools out there like Hypothesis or Google Docs, which is probably something more familiar, that allow you to um, do real-time work on an assignment. But if you haven't looked at Hypothesis, that may be something worth looking at. And when we think about assessing discussion is typically done on if you post one and respond to two, and typically we have a rubric of sorts that kind of carves that out. And I saw, I think Tatiana had put in about ABC, kind of like a format and a different approach there that would be worth checking out in the thread. But either way, something else to consider is because once a class gets above 12, 15, or 20, it can be really complex to try to track all the threads or to just go through a speed grader if you have it in your LMS. Something that I like to do is I like to put students in grades or groups rather, so then I can kind of grade the product of that group. So if I have 50 students in there and 10 groups of 5, that's different than looking at 50 students. But even at that length, I try to grade and validate the overall conversation as opposed to the participant. And I like to give shout outs, and I like to reference somebody that is moving the conversation in the direction I want it to go in. So akin to if I was in a large lecture class and we were having discussion back and forth, I wouldn't be able to respond to everybody in that class that day, but I would be picking up on points and saying, oh, that was good, that was good. Not that online and face-to-face conversations are equivalent or that I'm looking to match it, but in an online sense, it may not be realistic for our time to respond to everybody's post. So I like to pick up on the meta narratives and do that. And then iteratively throughout the semester, I might focus on, I'll take a look at this student, or I'll look at 3 or 4 in each discussion and offer a little bit more robust feedback. So over the course of the semester, everybody gets the hands-on approach, but it's not overwhelming all at once. Something I also think about is from a rubric standpoint. Um, I like to look at rubrics as almost like a medical chart or like a checklist. And something that I have found helpful is to put the rubric in the form of a checklist or template that a student can also interact with and engage. So if I have a student writing a paper, I could give them kind of a paper checklist with some blank spaces, and I can either have them fill it in online, or print it out, fill it in by hand, and then take a picture of it and then add that to the rubric as I grade their paper. So sometimes it's helpful for a student to say, this is the rubric for the assignment, and these are the instructions as they kind of work together, and I can kind of go through and check it off. Okay, it's calling the five to 7 pages, check. References, check. Did I offer a substantive interaction or comment or post? Yes, and here's what I said, or something like that. And then that also then kind of pushes that down to where the student then has more agency, becomes part of their own learning formation. And I also like to do a field check with my assignments and my assessments. So depending on what it is, if I'm and I do a lot of research, teaching in the research track. So I like to take my assignments and give them to various researchers I know at different schools and say, hey, would you do me a favor? Do you mind taking a look at this assignment and seeing what you think? Is this going to help a student move the needle towards research? And in one of the head of our IRB right now is a friend of mine, works in the PA program. And we're going to have lunch tomorrow in my office, and we're going to take a look at this one assignment we're working on for students to fill out an IRB form to conduct research. So it's kind of, so I always say, if you know someone in the field who is in the same arena as the assignment is at, funnel it to them and ask them what they think about the rubric and what they think about the assignment. Sometimes I think that my colleagues must think I really don't know what I'm doing, and maybe that's the case. I don't know, but it does help me to get people in the field to get their eyes on it, because usually there's a tweak or two that they make that is really invaluable for the student.